Max's foray into pharmaceuticals began reluctantly. His father, a meticulous and visionary chemist, had built their family business from a garage lab and sheer ambition decades prior. Over time, he carved a specialized niche, producing rare, essential medications. A venture yielding modest profits, but never achieving mainstream recognition. Upon his father's passing, Max and his siblings inherited the reins, bound by both legal duty and family loyalty. Balancing his own burgeoning family with the demands of the business, Max worked tirelessly to maintain it. Yet as the years passed, the burden grew heavy. With his daughters now in college and his marriage settling into a comfortable predictability, he decided it was time. Selling the company to a larger corporation felt not only logical, but liberating. Max sat in the bustling New York airport terminal, frustrated by the evening's delays. His gaze drifted across the hurrying travelers, boarding the flight he hoped would return him to Charlotte. The past few days had been a whirlwind, finalizing negotiations to sell the family pharmaceutical company with his sisters. The decision, a mix of nostalgia and the allure of new beginnings, was bittersweet. Though built on their father's ingenuity, the company had stagnated. Today the deal was done, the paperwork left with the lawyers. He'd hoped for the last flight home, but it was fully booked. He was third on the wait list. He hadn't called his wife Camila, unsure what to say. Nursing his second gin and tonic at the bar, Max watched the gate, contemplating the impending sale. It would net him over $10 million, plus a lucrative transition period with the acquiring pharmaceutical giant, signifying a new lifestyle for him and Camila. Their twin daughters were practically grown, both juniors at Duke, their tuition a constant drain on his finances. But all that was about to change. As the boarding process neared its end, a small miracle occurred. His name appeared on the waitlist screen. He threw cash on the bar, received a thumbs up from the bartender, grabbed his briefcase and duffel bag, and sprinted for the gate. The agent explained that a group of 4 no-shows had freed up seats for waitlisted passengers. Rushing down the jetway, Max boarded and realized he'd been upgraded to first class. A good omen, he mused. "Would you like something to drink as we taxi?" the flight attendant inquired. "I'll take another gin and tonic," Max replied, feeling it was well-deserved. He finished it quickly, settled into his seat, and fell asleep, dreaming of a future with Camila, filled with first-class travel. The jolt of landing roused him. Exhausted and slightly intoxicated, he made his way to a taxi, not wanting to disturb Camila at this late hour. The ride home to the outskirts of Charlotte was long enough for him to drift back to sleep. The driver had to wake him upon arrival. Max paid, added a generous tip, and stumbled out of the cab, his body heavy from the day. As he approached the house, already anticipating crawling into bed next to Camila, something stopped him in his tracks. A gold Mercedes sat in the driveway, blocking his side of the garage. It looked like a very stylish Mercedes, although to Max, all Mercedes seemed stylish. The house was dark, well past midnight. Max stood frozen. He'd spoken to Camila earlier, around noon, and she hadn't mentioned any visitors. He tried to rationalize the situation, desperate for an explanation that would allow him to slip into bed beside a warm, sleeping Camila. But his mind raced. Slowly he walked to the door connecting the garage and the house, unlocked it, and stepped inside the quiet home. He moved cautiously through the kitchen, up the stairs to their bedroom. The door was ajar, as if no one expected company. Max entered, and then he saw it. His mind went blank. His breath hitched. His heart seemed to stop. Camila lay naked on her side of the bed, her arm draped around a sleeping man, a slight smile on his face. Max stood there for what felt like forever. Finally, his mind began to work again. He looked at Camila's hand resting on the man's chest, both of them snoring softly. The pain hit him like a physical blow. Until this moment, he'd always found comfort in Camila's gentle snoring. It was soft, almost a purr, and it made him feel safe. Safe, like they were sharing something deeply intimate and secure. But now, That sound was a cruel reminder of everything he'd lost. Even in his heartbreak, Max's mind sharpened. He noticed the man's clothes neatly folded on the chair Max had sat in hundreds of times. Rage began to simmer within him. Max adjusted his pants, pulled out his wallet and car keys, and paused. He considered grabbing his tennis racket from the closet, using it to teach the man a lesson. He also thought about confronting Camila. While both actions might offer fleeting satisfaction, he knew they could lead to bigger problems. A new idea began to form. He pulled out his cell phone and snapped a few incriminating photos. Then, he gathered all of the man's clothes and shoes. The man, clearly bigger than Max, at least 4 or 5 inches taller and maybe 50 pounds heavier, made the tennis racket seem less appealing, even if it would have felt good in the moment. Max was 5'10" and weighed about 160. With the man's belongings in hand, Max took one last look at Camila, the woman he had loved for over 20 years, the mother of his daughters, and hardened his heart against the love that had once defined him. He left the bedroom without a tear, walked downstairs, and stepped outside. The key fob beeped, unlocking the Mercedes. Max placed his briefcase and duffel bag inside, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. He'd never been a fan of flashy cars, but as he navigated the familiar streets, he had to admit, he liked it. He figured out the controls, put the car in gear, and drove off. After a mile or so, Max pulled over to examine the man's wallet. It contained the usual: cash, business cards identifying him as Franklin Thompson, a senior sales manager at a local Mercedes dealership, and a driver's license with a Charlotte address. Max considered the implications. If Franklin had family in Charlotte, this could become messy, not just for Franklin, but for Camila too. But for now, Max was too exhausted to think clearly. He drove to the nearest motel and fell asleep. Camila Thompson was a cautious woman, not as sharp as her husband, Max, but careful. Her cautious nature had helped her keep her affair with Franklin Thompson secret for nearly 5 months. As she lay in bed with Franklin the next morning, she thought, "He's good in bed. Not as good as Max, though, but out of bed, no comparison." Franklin was getting possessive. He wanted to spend the night again, and she'd let him. But this would be the last time. She couldn't have a strange man in their bed, no matter how oblivious Max might be. It felt disrespectful. She planned to call Franklin later and end it. She headed for the shower. When Camila returned to the bedroom and began to dress, Franklin emerged from the shower, a towel around his waist. He paused. "Where did you put my clothes?" "What?" Camila replied. "I didn't move anything. They were folded right here on this chair." "But they're gone," Franklin said. "Did you take them to the guest room? They have to be here somewhere." He headed down the hall. "No, I didn't," Camila said, growing impatient. "They're not there," Franklin returned quickly. "Nothing there either." His voice trailed off as he tried to comprehend the situation. "Maybe you left them downstairs last night." "No, I'm sure I didn't," Franklin insisted, now more confused. "I'll go check." He hurried downstairs and back up, panicked. "Camila! Camila!" he shouted. "My car's gone. My clothes aren't downstairs. Someone was here last night, took my clothes and stole my car. Damn it!" he muttered, flustered. "What's going on?" Camila asked, bewildered. "How could my clothes and car be gone?" Franklin said, his mind racing. They'd been in the house all night. Could someone have broken in? Camila suddenly collapsed onto the bed. What? Franklin asked, kneeling beside her. "Franklin," she whispered, barely audible. "What if it was Max? What if he came home from New York while we were sleeping? What if he took your clothes and your car?" "Oh, crap," Franklin muttered, collapsing beside her. "You need to find out where he is. It could be him. But if he's still in New York, then it must have been a burglar," Camila said, her thoughts racing. "We need to call the police. I've got to get my stuff and my car back." "Damn this car," Franklin muttered. "If we call the police, they'll want to know who owns the car." He was frustrated. "It's in my wife's name for some damn tax reason." His voice trailed off, imagining the worst-case scenario. "I'll call his office. His secretary arrives early, and she should know where he is." Camila quickly grabbed her phone and dialed Max's office number, even though it wasn't yet 8 o'clock. Max's office phone. Sheila answered immediately. "Hey, Sheila, it's Camila." Camila, Sheila said, I know it's early, and I'm not sure where Max is. He didn't call last night. Have you heard anything from him? Sheila hesitated before answering. Camila, it's still early. I know the team in New York worked late yesterday, so they'll probably be starting late today. I talked to Max around 6 o'clock just before I left. He said they were making good progress and safe, like they were sharing something deeply intimate and secure. Now, that sound was a cruel mockery of everything he'd lost. Even in his heartbreak, Max's mind raced. He noticed the man's clothes neatly folded on the chair Max had sat in hundreds of times. Rage simmered. Max adjusted his pants, pulled out his wallet and car keys, and paused. He considered grabbing his tennis racket from the closet, using it to teach the man a lesson. He also considered confronting Camila. Both actions might offer temporary satisfaction, but he knew they could create bigger problems. A new plan began to form. He took out his cell phone and snapped a few incriminating photos. Then he gathered all of the man's clothes and shoes. The man was much larger than Max, at least 4 or 5 inches taller, and perhaps 50 pounds heavier. The tennis racket, while satisfying, now seemed less practical. Max, at 5'10" and 160 pounds, decided against it. With the man's belongings in hand, Max took one last look at Camila, the woman he'd loved for over 20 years, the mother of his daughters, and hardened his heart against the love he'd once felt. He left the bedroom without a tear, went downstairs, and stepped outside. The key fob beeped, unlocking the Mercedes. Max put his briefcase and duffel bag inside, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. He'd never cared for flashy cars, but as he drove through the quiet streets, he had to admit, he liked it. He familiarized himself with the controls, put the car in gear, and drove off. A mile later, Max pulled over to examine the man's wallet. It contained the usual: cash, business cards identifying him as Franklin Thompson, a senior sales manager at a local Mercedes dealership, and a driver's license with a Charlotte address. Max considered the implications. If Franklin had family in Charlotte, this could get messy for both Franklin and Camila. But Max was too exhausted to think clearly. He drove to a motel and collapsed. Camila Thompson was cautious, not as astute as Max, but careful. Her cautious nature had allowed her to conduct her affair with Franklin Thompson for almost 5 months undetected. As she lay in bed with Franklin the next morning, she thought, he's good. Not as good as Max, but out of bed, no comparison. Franklin was becoming possessive. He'd wanted to spend the night again, and she had allowed it, but this would be the last time. Having another man in their bed felt wrong, disrespectful. She'd call Franklin later and end things. She went to shower. When Camila returned to the bedroom to dress, Franklin emerged from the shower, towel-clad. "Where are my clothes?" he asked. "What?" Camila replied. "I didn't touch them. They were folded on the chair." "They're gone," Franklin said. "Did you put them in the guest room? They have to be somewhere." He went to check. "No," Camila said impatiently. "They're not there," Franklin returned, his voice laced with confusion. "Maybe you left them downstairs." "No, I'm certain I didn't," Franklin insisted. "I'll check." He hurried downstairs and back up, panicked. "Camila, my car is gone. My clothes are gone. Someone was here. They took my clothes and my car." "What?" Camila asked, bewildered. "How could my clothes and my car be gone?" Franklin said, his mind reeling. They'd been in the house all night. Had someone broken in? Camila's face paled. "Franklin, what if it was Max? What if he came home while we were sleeping?" "Oh, crap," Franklin muttered, sinking onto the bed. "You have to find out where he is. It could have been him, but if he's still in New York..." "We need to call the police," Camila said, her mind racing. "I need my car back." "Damn it," Franklin muttered. "If we call the police, they'll want to know who owns the car." It was in his wife's name for tax purposes. He imagined the worst-case scenario. "I'll call his office. His secretary gets there early. She'll know." Camila dialed Max's office, even though it was before 8 o'clock. Sheila answered immediately. "Hey, Sheila, it's Camila." "Camila, I'm not sure where Max is. He didn't call last night. Have you heard from him?" Sheila hesitated. "It's early. They worked late in New York last night. I spoke to him around 6 o'clock. He said they were making good progress and might finalize the deal today. So he's still in New York? Yes, I'm sure of it, Sheila said. I expect to hear from him later. Should I have him call you? Yes, please, Camila said, trying to sound calm. But only if he has time. I know how important this deal is. Got it, Sheila replied, ending the call. Camila turned to Franklin. He's still in New York. We should call the police and report a break-in and car theft. Her voice wavered. What do we tell them? Franklin asked, panicked. That your lover had his clothes stolen from your bedroom and his car from your driveway? We're screwed. Okay, Camila said, trying to think. How about I drive you home? You can change and report the thefts, as if they happened at your house, while your wife was out. Franklin considered this. I told my wife I was in Atlanta for a meeting. I'm not supposed to be back until noon. All right, Camila said. We'll wait until noon. You can say you left your keys in the car, and it was stolen while you were at the dealership. Franklin's expression brightened. That could work. I can say my wallet was in the car, too. Yeah, Camila said, a small smile playing on her lips. And we can hang out here for a while. Maybe take another shower. Together? Franklin nodded and stood. I need to call work. Camila, a paralegal at a small law firm, stepped into the hall to make her call. When she returned, Franklin was back in bed. She was tempted, but thinking of Max and her decision to end the affair, she resisted. Franklin, she said, I think it's time to end this. It was fun, but it could have been Max last night. We're lucky. Franklin, realizing she was right, nodded. Yeah, he said, already thinking of another woman he'd met at the dealership. Okay. It was a good run. Good, Camila said. Now let's find you some clothes. Dressing Franklin proved challenging. He was much larger than Max. Eventually, Camila found some old sweatpants she could alter and a faded pink sweatshirt. She trimmed the sleeves and enlarged the armholes. Looking at Franklin, she almost laughed at his ridiculous outfit, but settled for a faint smile. They decided to watch TV until it was time to go to Franklin's house. Meanwhile, earlier that morning, while Franklin was discovering his missing car and clothes, Max pulled into the driveway of the address on Franklin's driver's license. Nice house, Max thought, noticing a child's bicycle leaning against the garage. He sat for a moment, lost in thought, still tearless. His night at the motel had been short, and he'd gone for a run before dawn. He was surprised he didn't feel worse. Perhaps he was still in shock. He got out of the car, holding Franklin's wallet and license, and walked to the front door. He rang the bell. A young woman, attractive but frazzled, answered. Max held up Franklin's driver's license and pointed to the Mercedes. Before he could speak, she slammed the door. Seconds later, she reopened it, holding her cell phone. I've called 911, she said, her voice tense. Tell me my husband is okay, or I'll press send. Ma'am, Max said calmly, I have a photo on my phone of your husband and my wife in bed together last night, naked, asleep. I don't think there's anything wrong with either of them. But if you want to call 911, go ahead. I'll wait in the car. They stared at each other. The woman's face fell. She slowly opened the door. Before she could speak, a child's voice called from inside. Wait here, she said, disappearing into the house. Max heard voices, hers and a child's. She returned moments later with a mug of coffee. I hope you drink it black, she said. I need to get the kids ready for school. Frankly, I trust you more than I trust my husband right now. Max nodded and took the coffee. Not great, he thought. He considered calling his office but decided against it. He simply sat, sipping the coffee, waiting, sitting there. After a while, the woman returned, looking more composed. Her hair was neatly combed, and her lips were subtly tinted. She extended her hand to Max. Sorry for the disruption, she said. I'm Molly Thompson, married to Franklin Thompson, who is currently involved with your wife. Max couldn't help but laugh. It felt good. You're right about everything, he said. I'm Max Trondor. My wife's name is Camila Trondor. Max explained what had happened. As he spoke, he noticed Molly's eyes filling with tears. I'm divorcing Camila, Max said, his tone calm and steady. I'm sure these photos will help me get a fair settlement. I can send them to your phone if you think they'll be useful. Molly paused, her expression hardening. Yes, I should have them. she said flatly. But don't send them yet. If I see them now, I won't be able to forget them. You keep them. If I need them, I'll call you. Of course, Max replied, but I probably won't be at my current job for long, and I definitely won't be living in my current house. I'll give you my lawyer's contact information. You can reach him if you need the photos or any help with a divorce. All right, thank you, Molly said. But what should we do now? Are you planning to return the car or wait for Franklin? You've seen him. He's a pretty big guy. Max thought for a moment. Yesterday, he was supposed to be in Atlanta for a car meeting, staying overnight. He should be home this afternoon. Molly smiled faintly. You know, I actually like this car. I've never driven a Mercedes before. I think I'll keep it until someone makes me return it. Max grinned. Your husband, and I'm calling him a-hole, would probably be the one to make you give it back. Molly laughed, and Max joined in. They both needed it. Actually, Molly said, the car is registered in my name, for tax reasons. More depreciation. A-hole put it in my name since I drive more than he does. She paused. Since I own the car, I can give you a permit to drive it. If the police stop you, they can call me. Max liked the idea, but remained silent as Molly continued. One more thing, she said. There have been a lot of break-ins in the neighborhood lately. You have Franklin's keys and clothes. If the spare key we hide in the backyard is missing when he gets home, he might try to break in, and if our security system is armed, he'll definitely attract the police. Max raised an eyebrow. Molly, he said, I think I'm falling in love again. You're brilliant. All right, she said, smiling. Franklin can just wait until the kids and I get back from school this afternoon. I'll take them to the park. That should give him plenty of time to get himself into more trouble. Whatever happens, let me know, especially if he gets into trouble with the police. And call me when you need your car back. I don't want you getting into trouble. We're done now, Molly said, standing. You need to go, and so do I. Max drove off in the gleaming gold Mercedes, wondering how much a better color would cost. Molly had handed him the permit, and he assumed she would handle the rest. Around noon, Camila dropped Franklin off at his house. She hurried away, wanting to distance herself from the mess. Franklin walked to his front door, hoping it was unlocked, but also worried that Molly might be home. It was locked. He rushed to the backyard, to the rock where they kept the spare key. The rock was gone. Crap, he muttered. Should he break in? He tried the back door. Locked. He had no choice. He eyed the windows along the back wall. The largest one, leading to the family room, seemed easiest. He grabbed a branch from a nearby tree, broke it off, and tested the window. Barefoot, he needed to avoid the broken glass. He pulled 2 chairs from the back porch, positioned them near the window, and figured he could climb over them. He took a few deep breaths. Franklin threw the branch through the window. The glass shattered, followed instantly by the blaring of the home security alarm. To make matters worse, a police car happened to be driving down the street. Molly had called the station earlier to report the recent break-ins. Damn, Franklin muttered, scrambling to climb over the chairs and get inside to disable the alarm. Police, stop, hands up, a voice shouted. Franklin turned to see 2 officers, guns drawn. He hesitated, then climbed down and backed away. Officers, I can explain, he began. One officer grabbed his wrists, twisted them behind his back, and handcuffed him. Ignoring Franklin's explanation, the officer began reading him his rights. Do you want to say anything? Yes, Franklin blurted. This is my house. I didn't have a key. I broke in to get some clothes and call my office. The officers exchanged glances, eyeing Franklin's ridiculous outfit. One of them said, Sir, what are you wearing? Them gave him a skeptical look. Do you have any identification? No, not right now, Franklin stammered. I lost my car and all my stuff. I just need to get inside to grab some clothes. How did you lose your car, sir? The officer asked, unconvinced. Well, Franklin said, I stayed at a friend's house last night, and this morning, my car was gone, just wasn't there. Huh, the officer replied. Have you filed a report about a missing car? Maybe you left it at a bar or something? Franklin hesitated. He didn't want to reveal where he'd been or why he hadn't reported the car missing. The handcuffs were tight, and he was getting anxious. He needed a way out. You can call my wife, he suggested. She can identify me, and maybe you can take me to my office. I can get someone there to help me with some clothes. Dealing with a bit of nonsense at the dealership was better than jail. The officer took down Molly's number and stepped away to make the call. Franklin could hear part of the conversation. "Ma'am, this is Officer Riley. We're at address. We have a man here claiming to be your husband. He tried to break into your house because he lost his clothes." "Yes, ma'am." "No, ma'am." "Yes, ma'am. We'll take care of that." The officer returned. "She says her husband is in Atlanta. Anyone breaking into her house is a burglar. She hopes we lock you up and throw away the key." But, Franklin's voice cracked as the officers led him to their patrol car. Meanwhile, Camila arrived late to work, determined to catch up. She was still worried about Max. She hadn't heard from him. She called his cell. No answer. She called his office. "Hello, Sheila," Camila said. "Camila, it's Sheila. I'm starting to worry about Max." "I haven't heard from him either," Camila admitted. "No, I haven't heard anything new," Sheila responded. "I guess he's still in New York with the lawyers. But it's not like him not to call." "I'll call there and check on him," Camila said. "One of us will get back to you in a few minutes." "Okay, thank you, Sheila. You're the best." A few minutes later, Camila's phone rang. "Camila, it's Sheila. I spoke with the secretary at the law office. Max left late yesterday, hoping to catch the last flight back to Charlotte." "Did you talk to him?" Camila asked, hopeful. "I called his cell to check in," Sheila explained. "He answered and asked me to tell you he'd call later." "All right, thank you, Sheila," Camila replied, relieved, but still uneasy. A knot formed in Camila's stomach. Max had answered his phone, but only to tell Sheila to tell her he'd call later. Max, driving the gold Mercedes, was on his way to meet with a divorce lawyer recommended by Fred Thomas, his longtime business attorney. Max trusted Fred and hoped he could trust Fred's recommendation. "Mr. Trondor, please have a seat. Ms. Reinhardt will be with you shortly," the receptionist said. Max sat, reassured by the office's appearance. It was professional, without being ostentatious. A woman in her 50s, slightly plump, with brightly dyed red hair, entered the waiting room. "Mr. Trondor?" Max stood and nodded. "I'm Anna Reinhardt," she said. "Fred called ahead. He asked me to take good care of you. Let's go into my office and discuss your situation." Max followed her into a comfortable office. He accepted a coffee from the secretary and began telling his story. He explained about Camila's infidelity, his desire for a divorce, and his need to protect his assets, especially the proceeds from the sale of the family business. He omitted the part about the Mercedes, suspecting Anna might find it amusing. "Max, is it okay if I call you that?" she asked. He nodded. "And I'm Anna. Here's the good news. Well, relatively speaking. Fred mentioned you and your sisters owned the company before you married. That means your shares are considered separate property. Your wife has no claim to them or the proceeds from the sale, but you need to keep those funds separate from any joint accounts." "I think so," Max replied. "What about the house? Retirement accounts?" "Not such great news there," Anna said. "Because your salary is higher, you'll likely be paying child support for a few years. We can probably avoid contributing to retirement accounts by increasing alimony. Not ideal, but better than sharing your retirement decades from now. Since your kids are in college, no child support for them. I assume you're okay covering the rest of their college expenses?" "Yes, that works," Max said, absorbing the information. "What about the house?" Anna asked. "You and your wife will need to decide. Sell and split the proceeds, or one of you buys the other out." "After last night, I definitely don't want that house," Max said firmly. "I don't think Camila can afford to buy my share, so I guess we'll sell," Max said. "Okay, I'll handle the paperwork," Anna said. "The divorce petition is pretty standard. I can have it ready tomorrow morning. We can serve her tomorrow afternoon, and then work on a proposed settlement next week." "Wow, that's fast," Max said, surprised. "Max," Anna said, her tone softening, "if you think there's any chance you and your wife might benefit from counseling, or even just some time apart—" "No," Max interrupted. "It's just a shock. Less than 24 hours ago, I was excited to get home and tell Camila the good news about selling the company. Now I'm here talking about divorce. But we need to move forward." Anna paused. "Okay, but if you change your mind, just call." Max thanked her, paid the retainer, and left. He walked back to the Mercedes, his mind drifting back to Franklin. He remembered he'd promised to call Camila. Camila picked up the phone in her office. "Camila, it's Max," he said. "You called looking for me?" "Oh, Max, thanks for calling. I've missed you," she replied. "Where are you?" "I'm here in Charlotte," Max answered. When did you get back? She asked, her voice tensing. Last night. The knot in Camilla's stomach tightened. She leaned back in her chair, struggling to breathe. Cam, I'm about to hang up, Max said. No, Max, please, she begged. Can we meet just for a few minutes, please? Max hesitated. This was the woman he loved, the mother of his children, his partner for over 20 years. All right, Camila. The Center Cafe, at 6 Automne. His voice was thick with emotion. The knot in Camilla's stomach twisted tighter. She knew she had to say yes. The Center Cafe, where they'd met. Why am I afraid, she thought. Yes, Max. I'll see you there, she replied, her voice wavering. I'm sorry. I love you. Max didn't respond. He hung up. Camila sat there, tears streaming down her face, her chest aching. She arrived at the cafe early. Max wasn't there. She ordered a glass of wine and sat reflecting on her terrible choices. Her first real experiences had been with college football players, big, strong men who made her feel helpless. She'd experimented in high school, but it was in college that the physicality left a mark. When she met Max, she thought those days were over. He was everything she needed. Strong, loving, a great father and provider. It should have been enough. But then came the flight back from a weekend trip to the West Coast. Max had been meeting with a pharmaceutical company while she tagged along. Flying home alone, overnight, she'd been seated next to a large man, an NFL coach. They drank, talked, and she fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. She woke up to find his hand between her legs, under her skirt. Looking back, she knew she should have screamed or pushed him away, but she hadn't. Guilt consumed her. Camila had wanted to stay faithful to Max. She ended things with the coach, convinced herself she was done with cheating. When the girls went off to college, she cherished her time with Max. Their bond grew stronger, but the snake inside her returned when Max, in a gesture of generosity, told her to buy a new car, one she picked out herself. It felt like a gift. That's when she met Franklin Thompson at the Mercedes dealership. He hadn't sold her a car, but he knew how to manipulate her. He seduced her. She knew it was wrong, but it happened. Not because Franklin was good in bed, but because she was betraying Max. She had gotten away with previous affairs, convincing herself the marriage was intact. But with Max, it was different. They were closer than ever. Camila had been determined to stay faithful. She hadn't wanted to make the same mistake, especially with someone like Franklin, who now seemed like an idiot. But she had let him in, and now she feared the consequences. Hello, Camila. Max's voice startled her. She looked up. He looked older, more tired. It hit her hard. It was her fault. Her stomach churned with guilt. Hi, Max, she whispered. Thank you for being here. I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry. Max sat down. Can I ask you a few questions? Oh, Max, please don't, she pleaded. If we have any chance, the questions will destroy it. Please, we can't do this. But Max was resolute. Camila, we have to face this. If you can't answer my questions, I'm leaving. The snake inside her tightened its coils. Camila knew she had to endure this. Maybe, just maybe, if Max could express his pain, there was a chance for reconciliation. Okay, Max, she said, ask me anything. Max didn't hesitate. Do you know what time I arrived home last night? Arrived home last night? Camila blinked, caught off guard. No, not exactly. She had no idea what he would ask next, but the moment the words left her mouth, she knew what was coming. And do you know what I saw when I went upstairs to our bedroom? Or should I say, what I saw in our bedroom? Or maybe what used to be our bedroom? Max's voice was sharp. Yes, Max, Camila said, her voice shaking. I know what you saw, and I know it was probably one of the worst things you've ever seen. I know it's all my fault. Please, I'm begging you, listen to me. I'm so sorry. Max didn't respond immediately. His eyes darkened with an intensity Camila had never seen. Shut up, Camila, he said, his voice icy. Next question. How many men have there been since we got married? And if you lie, or if I even think you're lying, I'll walk out. Got it? The weight of his question crushed Camila's chest. Her mind raced, torn between the urge to lie and the painful truth that lying would only make things worse. Their marriage was probably already over. 3, Max. 3 men. And I regret every single one of them. Each word felt like a stone sinking in her gut. Max stared at her. She saw the hurt in his eyes, and it twisted inside her. "I can see it in your eyes," he said quietly. "I think our marriage is over. And I understand. You deserve better than me. I'd do almost anything to fix this. But I get it if you don't want me anymore." Camila's world crumbled. She had no words. She knew what was coming. "Call the lawyer," Max continued, his voice a mixture of pain and resolve. "Tomorrow, you'll be served with divorce papers." Without another word, he stood and walked out. Camila sat frozen, too stunned to cry at first. His words echoed in her mind. The guilt gnawed at her. Finally, the tears came. Tears of regret, of pain, of the full weight of what she had done. Max left the cafe, remembering how he and Camila had first met there. He wondered if this would be their last meaningful conversation. The word closeness felt like a bitter joke. How could he ever erase the image of his wife, his Camila, in bed with another man? He had always believed their marriage was strong, but this was something he didn't know how to overcome. Franklin, of all people. And in their bed. The image wouldn't leave his mind. Camila, naked in their bed, with Franklin snoring beside her. Max tried to push it away, but it clung to him, gnawing at him, reminding him their marriage was over. It had to be. Tears filled Max's eyes as he sat in the gold Mercedes. He didn't know how to move forward. He wiped his eyes, feeling grief and disbelief. Then he remembered something Molly had said. "Don't look at those photos. It will make it even harder to forgive." Max realized she had been right. Seeing those pictures would have made reconciliation impossible. He dialed Molly's number. "Hello?" Molly answered, her voice hoarse. "Molly, it's Max, just checking in. How are you doing? What should I do with the car?" "Max, thank you for calling," Molly replied, her voice steady but tired. "I'm hanging in there. You can keep the car for now. Franklin's in. So much trouble. He won't need it for a while." "Trouble?" Max asked, his tone light but lacking humor. "I hope you didn't shoot him." "No," Molly said dryly. "But he might wish I had. He got arrested for trying to break into our house. Apparently, he even swung at one of the cops. He's a big guy, so they tased him. Then something happened in jail. He won't talk about it, but I think another prisoner attacked him. I wouldn't ask. He had to call his brother to post bail. His whole family knows now." "Wow," Max said, shaking his head. "I can't say I feel bad for him, but I do feel for you. You made the right call this morning, not looking at those pictures. If you had, there'd be no hope." Molly sighed. "He finally came home a couple of hours ago, crying, begging me to let him stay. I don't know what to do. We have 2 little kids. I'm just trying to figure things out. Life won't be easy for him. His brother, who's a lawyer, told me to push for a post-nuptial agreement. Said he'd help with it. For now, I'm taking control of the finances. Franklin's on a very short leash. Keep doing what you need to do, Molly. I wish you the best," Max said, with genuine empathy. "And whenever you're ready for the car back, just let me know." They hung up. Max sat for a moment, feeling a strange mix of jealousy and relief. Perhaps Franklin had learned his lesson. His arrest, the alleged attack, and whatever had happened in jail might have scared him straight. Max hoped so, for Molly's sake, and for her children. Max drove back to the motel, his mind still reeling. He knew he had one more call to make before he could try to sleep. His daughters, Jane and Joan. "Hi, Daddy," Jane answered after a few rings, her voice bright but hesitant. "Hey, Janie," Max said, trying to sound upbeat. "I wanted to invite you and Joan to, well, let's call it brunch. Tomorrow, around 11 Untwick, the bistro on 4th Street?" "That sounds good," Jane replied, her tone warming. "Let me check with Joan." A few moments later, she returned. "Joan's in. We'll see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. "Great. See you then. Love you both." Max hung up, hoping they wouldn't tell Camila, but knowing he couldn't stop them. 1100 a.m. arrived quickly. Camila hadn't stopped crying. She had destroyed everything. Her marriage, her family, her life. She knew her daughters would find out soon, as would her parents, her friends. She would lose everything. And Max, poor Max, seeing her in bed with Franklin must have devastated him. Camila tried to control her sobs. The waitress asked if she needed the restroom. Camila declined. She paid the bill with trembling hands and left. She walked home, to the house that would soon no longer be hers, and found a bottle of gin. She poured herself a drink, not enough to forget, just enough to numb the pain. She drank it all, praying for a miracle that might bring Max back. The next morning, Max was already at the bistro when Jane and Joan arrived. He had reviewed and approved the draft divorce petition, then driven 2 hours from Charlotte, using the time to plan what he would say to his daughters. But first, as always, there were hugs and kisses. "How's school? How's work?" they asked. They ordered, ate, and cleared their plates. Then, the real conversation began. "Dad, we know something's wrong," Joan said, her voice full of concern. "You look sick. Are you here to tell us you have cancer or something? And if so, where's Mom?" "Girls," Max said, trying to soften the blow, "I have some bad news, but it's nothing physical. No one's dying." Jane interrupted. "Oh my God, did she run off with one of her firm's lawyers? A young hottie that Joan or I should be chasing?" Both girls burst out laughing, but when they looked at their father, his face was serious. "No, not Mom." Joan's face fell. "No." She couldn't finish the thought. "Girls, listen carefully," Max said steadily. "Mom changed. She cheated on me, but that doesn't mean she cheated on you." "Yes, it does, Daddy," Joan said through her tears. "If her cheating is destroying our family, then she cheated on us just as much as she did on you." Both girls cried. Max's tears followed. The girls stood and hugged him, then each other, clinging together. "Dad, let's get out of here," Jane said, her voice thick with emotion. "There's a park a couple of blocks from here. We'll have more privacy." People were staring. Max paid the bill, and they walked to the park, one girl on each side of him. They found a bench and sat huddled together. "Tell us, Dad," Jane said after a few moments. "We deserve to know how bad it is." Joan nodded. "You know we're adults now. We can handle this." Max took a deep breath. "On the way here, I was trying to figure out what to tell you. You're right. You're adults. And yes, your mom cheated on all of us. I found her in our bed with another man, and she admitted there were others before him." He paused, his words heavy. "I'm still in shock, but I know she and I won't recover from this. I've already spoken to a divorce lawyer. Mom will be served with the papers today." More tears fell. Silence descended as they absorbed the devastating news. "Girls," Max said gently, "no matter how bad this gets, you need to put yourselves and your schoolwork first. There's enough money to cover your senior year at Duke, and if either of you, or both of you, want to go to grad school, I'll make it happen." They looked at him, confused by the sudden change in direction. "But there's a catch," Max added. They blinked. "What do you mean?" Joan asked. "I'm happy to pay for your education," Max said, "but I expect you to work hard and get good grades. Yes, I know what your mom did makes it harder to focus on school, but you told me you're adults now, and real adults, mature, disciplined people, can handle adversity, right?" The girls looked at each other, both crying again. Then they stood and hugged him tightly. "Yes, Daddy," Joan sobbed. "You're the best, and we absolutely positively won't let you down." Jane, still emotional, looked thoughtful. "Dad, Joan's right. We won't let you down. But what about you? Are you going to be okay? What will you do?" Max thought for a moment. "Well, you think a lot during a 2-hour drive," he said, trying to lighten the mood. "First, I want you both to know that what you said doesn't surprise me. I know you'll keep doing great in school, and I'll keep being proud of you. As for me, what your mom did, it really hit me hard. I could crawl into a hole and suffer, feel sorry for myself, try to make peace with her. But I realized that isn't who I am." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've spent my whole adult life taking care of others. When I worked for my grandparents' company, I took care of them. After they left, I took care of my sisters when they ran the business. Then I took care of Mom, and of you girls." Max paused and wiped his eyes. "It might sound like I'm complaining, but I'm not. The company will be sold soon, and that will lift the burden of responsibility from my sisters. Camila's left. And you too. Well, I'll gladly take care of you, help you start your adult lives. So what, 2 home runs out of 3? Not bad considering the women in my life. The girls watched him, confused but also inspired. That leaves me, Max continued, his eyes brightening. And guess what? I'm looking at this whole mess, the betrayal, the divorce, not as the worst thing, but as an opportunity, a fresh start, a whole new life, a life dedicated to me. Okay, Dad, really? Joan said. I mean, if you mean it, that's great. Jane was more skeptical. Dad, what does this even mean? A new life? What? Work for another pharmaceutical company? Buy a farm? What's going on? Max chuckled. Good question, and I have a great answer. No details yet, but this new life will be physical. I'm going to run marathons, climb mountains, swim across the Atlantic, hike the Alps, go on safari. I have a million things I plan to do. He looked at both girls, his eyes sparkling. And who knows, while I'm doing all that, I might meet a nice woman who's doing the same. Damn, Dad, Joan said, awestruck. This is amazing. Both girls stared at him, mouths agape. This wasn't the man they knew. Did you really come up with all this on the drive here? Jane asked, astonished. Max smiled sheepishly. Well, yes, partly. But I didn't sleep much and a lot of different ideas were spinning around. I could start drinking and feel sorry for myself, but instead, I'm going to make the best of this mess. Trust me, I'll be fine. Max left with more hugs, kisses, and tears, then headed back to Charlotte in the gold Mercedes. As soon as he left, the girls called their mother. Hello? Camila's tired voice answered. Mom, it's Joan and Jane, Joan said, putting the phone on speaker. We just had breakfast with Dad, and he told us some terrible news. What? What did he say? Camila's voice was sharp with concern. Well, Joan began carefully, divorce is a terrible word, and the reason is your betrayal. Dad gave us more details, but that's basically it. Is it true? There was a long pause, then a soft, tormented sigh. Oh, girls, Camila said, her voice breaking. This is difficult. Your father and I have been married for so long, and this mistake. Yes, I made a big mistake. Well, more than one, actually. But I'm sure we can work through it. I just need to give your father some time. Mom, Joan interrupted, trying to stay calm. Dad said divorce. He didn't talk about fixing anything. He was talking about cheating. Camila hesitated. Well, yes, technically he's right, but that doesn't mean we can't fix it. I think you're delusional, Jane's voice cut in, sharp with frustration. He told us he already met with a divorce lawyer. He said there's no going back. We don't want to take sides, Joan said more gently, but you need to face reality. More silence. Then Camila's voice, barely a whisper. I know. I messed up. I ruined my marriage. I think your father hates me. And he's right. I've done disgusting things. He told me to hire a lawyer, and he was right about that too. I'm sorry, girls. We know it's tough for you too, Mom, Joan said softly. Don't worry about us. We'll be okay. We know Dad is doing everything he can. You need to take care of yourself. Hiring a lawyer sounds like a good idea, Jane added practically. Jane and I can come to Charlotte if you need us. Thank you, girls. That's sweet, Camila said, her voice thick with emotion. I'll be fine. I just need some time. They hung up. The girls were still unsure what to do. You know, Joan said with a bittersweet smile, it's funny, although it's really not. But we're more worried about Mom, who created this whole mess, than about Dad. They talked a bit longer, eventually deciding to stay at school and let their parents deal with things on their own. Camila sat at home in Charlotte, nursing a hangover and feeling even worse after talking to her daughters. She knew she needed to get up, get dressed, do something. But as she considered buying more gin, the doorbell rang. Camila opened the door to find a young woman chewing gum. Can I help you? Camila asked, confused. Yes, ma'am, the woman said, popping her gum. Are you Camila Trondor, Max Trondor's wife? Yes, that's me, Camila replied, frowning. Why? You've been served, the woman said, handing Camila a folder of documents and taking a photo. What? What's this? Camila asked, but the woman was already walking back to her car. Shaking, Camila returned inside and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder. When she saw the title of the first document, her heart sank. A petition for divorce. She remembered Max's final words, "Get a lawyer." Sitting there, surrounded by the remnants of happier times, she knew those days were gone. She'd ruined everything. There was no going back. 6 years later, Camila sat in the ballroom of an upscale hotel, watching Jane dance with her new husband. Her mind drifted to the past, back when the girls were teenagers. Life had felt overwhelming then. Too many activities, too much teenage angst, too many boys who were either too rude or, from Camila's perspective, too kind. Max had been busy with his job, and her paralegal work had been dull. Life had seemed chaotic. Now she longed for those days. She was still working at the same law firm, buried in the same paperwork she'd always dreamed of escaping. "Camila, here's your wine," Carl, her companion, said, handing her a glass. Camila looked up at him. He was sweet, middle-aged, a little paunchy and balding. He'd come with her to Jane's wedding. "The bride looks lovely," Carl said, smiling. "Just like her mother." "Thank you, Carl," Camila replied warmly. "You're very kind." He was a nice man, and she could see herself marrying him if he were interested. But he wasn't Max. Her eyes drifted across the room to her ex-husband. He had just returned from a mountaineering trip in Nepal, and she couldn't help but notice how incredibly fit he looked. Like a Greek statue, tanned, muscular, and still handsome. He was laughing with Joan and her boyfriend, holding hands with a woman as beautiful and fit as he was. Camila felt a pang of jealousy. She knew Max had moved on, but part of her still longed for what they had lost. Joan had told her Max met the woman on a mountaineering trip in South America. They'd been traveling, climbing, and sailing together for months. Camila felt sick just thinking about it. "Camila," Carl said gently, trying to get her attention. "Yes, Carl," she replied, distracted. "I think we should leave," Carl suggested, his voice calm but firm. "You've done your duty as mother of the bride. Staying here, staring at your ex-husband, isn't helping you. And I dare say, it's not good for what we have going either." Camila considered his words. "You're right, Carl. You're sweet. Let me say goodbye to my daughters and we'll head out." She walked over to her daughters, hugging and kissing them, wishing the newlyweds well. Despite the difficulty, she avoided Max and his perfect girlfriend. Max noticed Camila leaving. For a brief moment, he felt a pang of sadness. Their shared history still tugged at him. As he stood there, Joan turned to him. "Sorry, Dad, what did you say?" Max blinked, pulled from his thoughts. "What was that, Joan?" Joan looked at him curiously. "Do you remember that weird gold Mercedes you were driving when you, Jane, and I had breakfast that day you visited us at Duke? What happened to that car?" "Ah, that's a whole story I won't bore you with," Max replied, shaking his head. "Let's just say I borrowed that odd gold Mercedes from a friend and ended up giving it back. I think she sold it. It was a really unlucky car." Max turned to his girlfriend, eager to talk about their next trip to the mountains, putting the car conversation behind him.